on the air with the destruction from a tornado outbreak. With at least 2 people dead in Alabama, this storm moving into the Atlantic. We're live on the ground near the damage, and with the story from one woman who barely made it out alive. Plus, a rare press conference today from the Attorney General taking questions after a big 24 hours for the Justice Department. What Merrick Garland is telling us about January 6th and the Jackson water crisis coming up. And RoboCop in real life, why there's a lot of backlash to this new push in San Francisco to let police use killer robots. Yes, you heard that right. Plus, think Taylor Swift tickets were tough? We're only 603 days away from the Paris Olympics, and there's already a lottery this week to sign up for the chance to get tickets. The chance to get tickets. Why organizers think this is the right strategy after years of ticket drama at the games. And we're taking you behind the scenes of New York's biggest Christmas party, the tree lighting at Rockefeller Center. Craig Melvin will be joining us to tell us everything you wished you knew but were afraid to ask. And tonight's backstory, that's a little bit later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and right now, as we speak, we've got those heavy storms slamming the U.S., finally starting to drift off into the Atlantic after bringing super intense winds to the East Coast and triggering a tornado outbreak that has left at least 2 people dead. Here's what it looked like right as these storms were touching down in Alabama, in Louisiana, in Mississippi. About 30 tornadoes reported overnight, with millions of people facing warnings from Texas to Georgia, even as far north as Indiana. We now know who the 2 people were who died. An 8-year-old boy and a 39-year-old woman in Montgomery, Alabama, with the tornadoes just ripping up trees and farmland. Like, look at this. Some of these pictures out of Alabama here. Communities, cities, towns left to pick up the pieces. You're looking at Steens, Mississippi. Roofs, blown off sheds, houses with huge holes in them, trees right on top. That's what's left of where somebody used to live up until about 12 hours ago. Thousands of people still don't have power, with survivors describing what they remember most from this storm. It's the sound of it. Listen.
It was terrifying. You know, you hear about it on the news and you're like, oh yeah, no, it literally sounds like a freight train.
Blaine Alexander is in Montgomery County, Alabama for us. Blaine, you're on the ground, you're seeing the damage, you're talking to people, including one woman who just barely was able to get out of her home safe and sound. Tell us more.
And Hallie, we heard so many stories just like that one. Where I'm standing right now, this is Flatwood, Alabama. It's a very small, a close-knit community. A lot of people that I spoke to say they grew up here. They know everybody here. I talked to more than a dozen people here, and they tell me that without question, every single person almost was impacted by the storms last night. This kind of structure that you see behind me, or what used to be a structure, was the community center here in Flatwood. I talked to an official, and it tells me that this was a gathering place for birthday parties where people would come and hold dinners and events. Now it's completely leveled. But really, it kind of just shows the scope of the damage. Not too far from where I'm standing is the home where those 2 people were killed. A 39-year-old mother and her young 8-year-old son. Her husband was able to make it out. I spoke with a family member who says he was in the hospital having surgery. I talked to the person who lives across the street who says neighbors tried to come in and help. Really, this is the place, especially when you talk about the human toll that was hit the hardest. But when you talk about just how widespread this storm was, we're talking about some 33 or so tornado sightings stretching across at least 4 different states. Now, what's interesting about all of this, Hallie, is that experts say this is typically not how much where we see tornadoes. Typically, it's earlier in the year. Here's what one woman told me about her very narrow escape. Take a look.
Thank the Lord that I was able to get up and get out of that bed in time.
How much notice did you have?
Me, I didn't have none. Because I'm asleep. I didn't hear anything. And if my grandson had to call me and woke me up, I'd have been still in that bed sleeping.
And Hallie, I heard countless stories just like that one. When I talk to officials here, they say that this is going to be a long-lasting impact. It will take quite some time to rebuild here in Flatwood, Hallie.
I can hear those chainsaws even tonight, even behind you as we speak. Blaine Alexander, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's bring it back here to Washington, where in just the last hour, we heard from the Attorney General pointing to the work of his prosecutors after a huge conviction in the most high-profile January 6th case yet, with Merrick Garland getting a little cagey about whether he's happy with cooperation from Congress so far, and promising to keep working to hold accountable January 6th participants. Listen.
As the verdict of this case makes clear, the department will work tirelessly to hold accountable those responsible for crimes related to the attack on our democracy on January 6, 2021.
He's basically saying, hey, we're not letting up. He's also blasting the city of Jackson, Mississippi, promising to work with urgency to make sure people there have clean and safe drinking water. As Ken Delanian knows, he was in the room for that news conference, got a question to the AG. So let's start with that, Ken, and because there are kind of a couple of big buckets here, right? We love buckets on this show. Bucket one is January 6th. You had a couple of headlines here. Garland saying he wants all the transcripts from the January 6th committee and dodging the question of whether he's satisfied with cooperation so far on this, even as you asked him about, he also said, hey, the special counsel, Jack Smith, is going about his work as it relates to those J6 investigations.
Well, I happen to know, Hallie, that the Justice Department is deeply frustrated with this rather bizarre stance by the January 6th committee to not turn over the transcripts of all the interviews they've done with people who, after all, are part of a Justice Department criminal investigation. It's perplexing to people over here. They don't understand it. The committee has not provided a good answer as to why they haven't done that. And so what you saw there from the Attorney General, it was his sort of diplomatic way of saying he wants the transcripts. And then in terms of the special counsel, it wasn't me, it was actually my colleague Josh from Politico asking him, has he met with the special counsel face to face? And I think we have some sound of his answer. It had to be a careful one because actually the special counsel is not in the country right now, but take a listen.
In the course of deciding on Mr. Smith as special counsel, I did meet with him. He has been meeting with the members of his team to get up to speed. He promised to the American people in his own statement that there would be no pause or hiccup in his work, and I understand that that is exactly what's going on now.
So presumably he met with Jack Smith before Mr. Smith had a bicycle accident in the Netherlands where he was working as a war crimes prosecutor in The Hague. That's where he remains right now, we're told, while he recovers, and he is being briefed on the investigation. Presumably these meetings are virtual meetings he's having with the people conducting the investigation. He doesn't appear to be in any rush to get over here because pretty much this investigation has a life of its own at this point, and his role is really to make some very important charging decisions down the line. It's not like he has to build a team from scratch here. He may hire a few people, but the investigations are cooking along.
What's so interesting here, Ken, we don't often see Merrick Garland doing these kinds of press conferences, right? So this was unusual in the scope of his sort of service leading the Department of Justice so far. But he clearly wanted to take, in the words of one expert I talked to, a victory lap as it related to what is happening, even just the last day. He talked about not just those high-profile cases, the conviction on seditious conspiracy that we've discussed, the Jackson water crisis, which we're going to discuss, but cases on guns, drugs, terror, child exploitation. Again, just in the last 24 hours for his agency. On Jackson, right, which is the ongoing water crisis that we've covered a lot here, our Yamiche Alcindor, who has been all over this story, got in a question about this push for environmental justice. She wanted to know a question that we've talked about, timeline. How long is it going to take for people in this city, right, a big city in Mississippi, the capital city in Mississippi, to get safe drinking water? Here's what the Attorney General had to say. It's not super specific. Watch.
We are approaching this with the greatest possible urgency, and we believe our partners in this are doing so as well. So we will bring this to conclusion as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah, I think he doesn't know the answer to what the timeline is really, but he said that essentially from a legal point of view, they did everything they could to speed it up. They have a consent decree signed by a judge. They are trying to force some action down in Jackson, Hallie.
Ken, thank you. Let's take you to Capitol Hill now, where President Biden tomorrow is planning to send 2 of his top deputies to make sure he's got all 50 Democratic senators ready to vote yes for this plan that would stop a nationwide rail strike. You have Labor Secretary Marty Walsh, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg planning this meeting as senators are getting 2 versions of a bill, both passed today by the House. You see the vote totals here. So one is this deal, right? It's like the deal that would avoid a rail strike. Fine. The other is an amendment that would give these rail workers sick days, 7 of them, which, according to the Labor Department, is 1 less than the national average of 8 sick days, which most workers have. Remember, or at least the average number that workers have. So 7 sick days for rail workers. That would be up from the current number, which is 0. Our team, one of our producers, talked with a union rail worker who described what these sick days might mean to him. Listen.
I just had to take the day off from work without pay because my kid was sick and I don't have paid sick leave. So that's 1 more day that I didn't get paid this year. We're just human beings, just like everybody else. We're working people. We deserve paid sick leave.
Listen, this thing has to get through the Senate, right? And as we know here in Washington, 60 votes in the Senate Kind of a tough hill to climb, considering there's 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans. But Senator Bernie Sanders, who's one of the lawmakers behind this push, says he's cautiously optimistic there will at least be a vote. Hallie Vitale is joining us now. So, okay, optimism from a senator who isn't always considered among the most optimistic in the Democratic conference. Yeah. But given that only 3 House Republicans voted for this thing in the other chamber, how far is this sick day measure actually going to go on the Senate side?
Probably not very far, and in large part, it's because of the reasons that Senator.
Thing or no?
Yeah, it sinks the whole thing from the paid sick leave perspective, though it's unclear how they're going to ultimately do this in the Senate. Basically, in the last few minutes, we've confirmed that they've run a hotline on this in the Senate, which is effectively them putting the pieces together.
English. Don't ever say run a hotline, Hallie Vitale, without explaining what that is. My God.
First of all, this is one of my favorite Senate terms, but second of all, that's basically them saying we're creating the rules on this as we go.
Yes,
they have to, in every instance. Yes, exactly. In every instance, all 100 senators can come together at any time and say, hey, we want to do this one by 51 votes, simple majority. Hey, we want to do this one by 60 votes, majority. They can kind of make up the rules as they go along. So that's what they're doing now. They're saying that they want to do each of these separate votes that already passed the House at a 60-vote threshold, which once again puts us back in the position of Democrats hunting for 10 Republicans who can get behind not just the deal to avert the crisis itself, but also the deal to get behind more paid sick leave days. And Senator John Thune put it well of the Republican objections to this. I'll play for you what he said because it encapsulates really well the conservative position here.
I don't know there's any interest on our side in amending a deal that's been negotiated for 3 years between the unions and their and the railroads, and then that has been blessed by the administration. So if we start getting in there and actually amending that thing, I think that sets a really bad precedent.
And I would say one thing here. Thune is saying that to say that Republicans don't want to get involved, and that's why they're going to vote no, by and large, on this provision. But what Democrats are saying is they're also pretty similarly concerned of getting involved here in these negotiations, especially because coming in at this point, making these deals and doing these votes to avert this crisis, they all agree you have to do it for the economy, but it also makes it so that union workers have less leverage in their negotiations if Congress is going to swoop in and say this is the deal you're getting regardless.
Let me talk about those union workers, specifically Devin Mance, Sully Sullivan, who does this show, one of our top producers here, was talking about how, with Devin Mance, about what do you think about this, right? The fact that paid sick leave was not included in the initial deal that President Biden worked out. Like, would workers be okay, from his perspective, with something that didn't include that sick time? Here's what he said.
Our membership is very upset. Our membership does not think this goes far enough. The paid sick leave, the Presidential Emergency Board, none of these does our members actually think is a fix.
Bottom line, Hallie, if you set aside the Washington speak and the hotlines and the Senate, like, it's the holiday season, it's shipping season. Is there going to be a rail strike or not, based on the analysis that you can do from the reporting you've done?
It feels like there's not, but the question is going to be how many paid sick leave days actually end up coming out of this. How stressful is it going to be to get there? Yeah. Exactly. And that's because, again, they separated this for a reason, Hallie. Vote 1 is to avert the strike and ratify the deal as it was negotiated with less paid sick days. The second part of it is more paid sick days, and that's the part where it's unclear if they're going to have the votes.
Hallie Vitale, thank you very much. We want to get to some breaking news just into us also from Congress. The House Ways and Means Committee apparently now has former President Trump's tax returns, several years of them, after years of fighting to get them. The committee not immediately returning a request for comment, but this is a significant step, coming not too long after the Supreme Court said no to the former president's push to block the release of his taxes to Democrats. Keep in mind, Republicans will take over the House next year, so this was kind of Dems' last chance to get their hands on these returns. The Treasury spokesperson confirming they've complied with the request from House Oversight. Unlike other recent presidents, actually every president in modern history, former President Trump did not make his tax returns public when he ran. He said he'd been audited by the IRS. He's also said that people just don't care. Voters don't care. Suspended Florida prosecutor Andrew Warren is fighting for his job in court today, months after Governor Ron DeSantis suspended him for his views on abortion and trans rights. It's a federal trial, so there weren't any cameras in Tallahassee court today, but it comes after Warren, who's a Democrat, got suspended by DeSantis, who is a Republican, because Warren signed statements saying he wasn't going to criminally charge people looking to get abortions or people who wanted gender transition treatments. So after getting suspended, Warren sued. He also sat down with our Kerry Sanders the day of that suspension, telling him why it was so important to fight back.
He's overstepped his bounds by a huge amount. He cannot rule by fiat, and he can't supplant the will of the people in electing me just because he wants to go and make a press announcement.
Kerry Sanders is joining us now. So, Kerry, Warren was today trial begins. First witness, Warren. He basically said he feels like he was yanked out of his job just for exercising his free speech on abortion rights, on trans health care. Talk us through how it went today and what's next.
Well, here's the question. It is not so much whether he can say what he said, because he did. It is more a matter, and this is a constitutional question for the Florida Constitution, whether the governor can remove him for saying that he is not going to prosecute somebody for an abortion issue or transgender, because there was no specific case that was presented to show he may have said this, but then he followed through with this and did not prosecute. And so the governor says by simply signing on to this, he has neglected his duty. But because Andrew Warren and those who support him in this say, but there was no exact case to demonstrate that he was not doing his job and, quote, neglecting his duty, that the governor should not have removed him. And as you heard it, he told me in that interview, he even questions whether the governor constitutionally has the authority to remove him from office. Hallie?
More than 90 DAs around the country have signed a letter saying they also don't plan to prosecute people who are looking for or providing abortions. This feels like, and the reason why we're talking about it on a national streamcast, Kerry, right, a national newscast, is because this feels like a microcosm of what is playing out around the country. And it is also, as Florida has become, as you well know, a state where these issues are flashpoints now, as Governor DeSantis has made issues on abortion rights, LGBTQ plus rights, the center of this culture war push that has swept him into re-election, right, swept him into office yet again, and turned Florida more and more solidly red.
And not only that, we have to remember that Governor Ron DeSantis, the Republican who removed the Democrat Andrew Warren here, is likely to become a presidential candidate.
That's
and
right.
As he has done this removal of the state attorney, he has received a fair amount of applause and support from his base in the state of Florida and, quite frankly, beyond the state of Florida. And yes, you mentioned that 90 prosecutors across the country have signed on to a letter that said criminalizing abortion does not make it stop. It's going to continue. As part of that letter, we're going to show it up on the screen here for you. You can see that among the things they said is that as elected prosecutors, ministers of justice, and leaders in our community, we cannot stand by and allow members of our community to live in fear of the ramifications of this deeply troubling decision. And what they're saying is, if this can happen in Florida, where else might it happen? And signing on to that letter were prosecutors from liberal states like California and very conservative states like Texas and Virginia, Minnesota. You've got people signing in from all over. So this is a collective belief among those who signed on that are prosecutors, that they don't want to see the authority of the governor or whatever authority is in their state to be able to just say, because you stated this, not because you did it, but because you stated it, you have now been removed from office. It's going to be up to a federal judge in this case. We expect this probably to continue on about 4 or 5 more days. Andrew Warren wanted to call Florida Governor Ron DeSantis as his first witness in openings. That was not allowed. If he calls him in a rebuttal towards the end, it'll still be up to the judge to determine whether the governor should indeed show up. A decision in the offing.
Kerry Sanders, glad to see you on this one. Thank you very much. Let's take a look at the markets today, which are closing in the green, okay, pretty high up. The Dow, the NASDAQ, after some comments from the Fed chair, Jay Powell today. Take a look here at the screen I'm about to show you. The Dow up more than 2%, the S&P more than 3%, the NASDAQ up nearly 4.5%. Why, right? Like, hey, why are the markets doing so well? Because investors are low-key psyched about what they heard from Powell, that even though interest rates will still probably go up next month, is not going to be as much of a hike, like maybe a half point instead of the 3/4 of a point that they've done the last 4 times. NBC business and data reporter Brian Chung is joining us now, stripping away the Fed jargon, which, this is a good sign as far as the markets go, because it is a signal that perhaps inflation is slowing, and we are not careening into a recession as much as folks initially thought. Fair read?
Yeah, and inflation, by the way, has come down. It was 9.1%, then 8%, now 7.7%. But keep in mind, where the Fed wants to be is at 2%. So as they make interest rate hikes higher, right, that means that borrowing costs get more expensive. Hopefully that means businesses don't invest as much and people don't go out and spend as much. They're hoping that they can make that inflation number come down to 2% a little bit quicker. But here's the challenge, right? The Fed has made these interest rate hikes they've done that at the fastest pace we've seen in decades. Now, if you're trying to hit the brakes here, at some point you want to let up, and you hope not to have to abruptly do that once you ultimately get to 2%. So the idea here is the Fed needs to take their foot off the brake pedal just a little bit. They're still going to be slowing the economy, which means they'll still do interest rate hikes, but just not at the magnitude that we had seen in the last 4 consecutive ones. That's what the Fed chair was hinting today, and that's the reason why you had Wall Street getting a little bit giddy this afternoon.
Talk about giddy is an interesting word. Talk about only because you wonder, is it a sugar high, right? What are we going to see tomorrow? We'll find out. Talk about the nexus to the housing market and housing prices, because we're seeing the price of a mortgage tick down a little bit. Explain that.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the price of a mortgage has gone up very high over the course of 2022. It was at 7% as of about 2 weeks ago. It's come down a little bit since then. And it's important to remember the Fed doesn't directly control mortgage rates. They're set by the market. So maybe 2 weeks ago, the mortgage markets had already factored in where they felt the Fed would stop their interest rate hikes ultimately. Now, whether or not we'll see that come down even further remains to be seen. But look, I don't know how many more people are going to be interested in getting a mortgage at 6.5% rather than 7%. It's still very expensive either way, Hallie.
Brian Chung, thank you very much. Relatives of the 3 people killed in a triple homicide in California, allegedly by a police officer suspected of catfishing a teenage girl before killing her family members. They're speaking now during an emotional news conference today, these relatives of the victim, saying nobody could have ever imagined something like this happening to them. Michelle Blandon's mom, dad, and sister all died the day after Thanksgiving. She's remembering the holiday and the time that she spent with them before their lives were stolen, before they were murdered. Listen.
We had a family debate, and it got heated on if the brownies my mom made should be frosted with sprinkles or just left plain. Little did I know on that day that would be the last time that my husband and I would see my parents and my sister again.
Police say a 28-year-old newly sworn-in cop from Virginia drove across the country to this girl's home, killed her mother and grandparents, and set their house on fire before driving off with her. Zinkley Esamwa is joining us now. It is gut-wrenching, Zinkley, to hear and to see from this family, from that sister. Police are saying that this guy tried to groom this young girl. Where does the investigation go from here? What else are we hearing from police?
Yeah, Hallie, today was just a sobering day, and this whole story has been. And police say, law enforcement say, that grooming likely happened online, though they did not name the dating app that it may have occurred on. The man allegedly posed as a teenager, and that's how he got in touch with her. So in focus right now is the digital investigation, so police can learn more about just how these two were communicating. And law enforcement are still investigating the cause of death. For those 3 viewers will remember, the house actually caught on fire, so authorities are also investigating that fire as well, a lot of different elements. But one of the biggest question marks, Hallie, is how was a man allegedly capable of this able to be sworn into law enforcement? So take a listen to what they had to say.
When we see somebody, we ask the same questions you all ask. How did this person get past the background investigation? How did this person get past the polygraph investigation? You know, but from what we understand so far about him, there's really not a big rap sheet on this person or anything that would indicate that they could see that outcome.
Now, when it comes to the crime scene, police did say there was no evidence of use of a firearm used there, so we're waiting for an autopsy to release the official cause of death for the 3. Hallie?
What do we know about the girl at the center of this, the girl who was allegedly groomed, whose family is now dead, who's just going through an absolute hell of a nightmare at this point?
Yeah, a nightmare that none of us can really comprehend. And she's just 15. She's receiving trauma counseling, according to authorities. And of course, she's going to be a crucial part of this investigation. But they say they have only interviewed her minimally as they don't want to overwhelm her right now. And authorities do say that there is no indication that she knew this murder was going to happen. So she's also probably just in shock, as many of us are. Back to you.
Zinkley Esamwa, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Coming up here on the show, you've got Prince William and Princess Kate taking their first visit to the U.S. in 8 years. They just arrived not too long ago on a commercial plane. We're going to have more on their visit. Plus, what was your jam this year? I know you looked at your Spotify Wrapped, which is out today. We'll tell you the year's top streaming artists for everybody in the country coming up in the 5 Things. You're going to be seeing a lot more Tom Cruise in theaters this holiday season. We'll explain in a minute in the 5 Things. But first, a fight in San Francisco today over the decision to give the city's police robots, killer robots, robots that could use deadly force to kill suspected criminals in emergencies. That is exactly what it sounds like. That's the whole story, right? And as you can imagine, there is some backlash to this. The Human Rights Watch saying today this could be a dangerous and dehumanizing move. The ACLU of Northern California tweeting out the robots are not going to make San Francisco safer, writing police kill black and brown people at epidemic rates and remote triggers are easier to pull, they say. This comes after overnight, the city's Board of Supervisors voted 8-3 to give police the option to use, again, robots that can kill, potentially deadly remote-controlled robots when and I'm quoting here, when the risk of loss of life to members of the public outweighs any other force option available. And listen, things got testy, man, during this 2-hour-long discussion about it. Every side accusing every other side of fear-mongering here. One supervisor who voted for this said the people against it were starting to look anti-police by painting the department as not trustworthy. Dana Griffin joins us now. And Dana, there are real concerns here about what this means for public safety, the implications sort of morally, ethically, along racial justice lines, because, you know, you look at the numbers of who is more likely to be killed by police.
And Hallie, that is an issue that one of the supervisors who voted against this raised last night. Supervisor Shaman Walton said in a statement, according to KNTV, this is not in line with making changes to address the disproportionate number of black people and people of color that are typically on the receiving end when police weapons are utilized. Now, other groups, like you mentioned, the ACLU of Northern California, do not think police departments should be using, quote, killer robots because police kill black people at more than twice the rate of white people, according to analysis by the Washington Post. Hallie?
Talk about the San Francisco police response, right? Because the PD says, hey, like, we use robots for other stuff. They've used robots for years for things. There's no plans, they say, to pre-arm robots. It's not like the robots are going to have guns. To be clear, when we say killer robots, it's not the Terminator walking in with like a weapon. You know, that's not what this is. These are like, you know, think about like the bomb robots, right? That kind of idea. There's some moves now to try to address some of these concerns. Walk us through kind of the other perspectives here.
So, Hallie, this plan passed after an amendment clarified that robots would be used as a lethal option only after alternative force and de-escalation tactics are used first, or officers determine that they cannot subdue the threat safely after evaluating other options. Now, only 3 supervisors can authorize the use of robots as a deadly force option, so that kind of limits the ability for them to just kind of use these haphazardly. So hopefully that'll, you know, ease some concerns that people may have. Hallie?
Thank you very much. A fascinating story. We'll see how it plays out there up in San Francisco. Appreciate it very much, Dana. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, researchers say an experimental Alzheimer's drug may be promising in trying to slow down the disease. This is really important here because the study found that the drug delayed things getting worse in patients by about 5 months. May not sound like a lot to you, but it might be huge if you have known somebody with Alzheimer's, people who have it, their loved ones. Now, there are some side effects, brain swelling and bleeding. The company that makes this drug said most of those side effects were mild or asymptomatic. Number 2, some big changes for House Democrats today, with the party officially passing the leadership torch from Nancy Pelosi to Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. The New York Democrat now becoming the first black party leader ever, telling reporters he's going to fight for the people. You see Jeffries here flanked by his 2 new deputies, Catherine Clark, Pete Aguilar. The trio, on average now, well, I'll just tell you the number. This makes now this generation of leadership 31 years younger than the previous generation of leadership. Number 3, Kim Kardashian's divorce from Ye has been finalized. The rapper, of course, who used to go by the name Kanye West, agreeing to pay her $200,000 a month in child support, according to court documents. They're going to share custody of their 4 kids. His lawyer didn't immediately respond to a request for comment, and Kardashian's lawyer declined to comment on this one. Number 4, Top Gun Maverick flying back into theaters for 2 weeks over the holiday season. It is the highest grossing movie of the year. You've probably already seen it. Well, now you get a chance to see it again on the big screen, in the surround sound, the whole 9 yards. This thing grossed like $1.5 billion when it was in theaters the first time. It's going to hit Paramount Plus late next month. You got to figure the studios are like, hey, if we can bring in a little more cash while people are off for the holidays, might as well. Number 5, it's the most wonderful time of the year, the time when your Spotify is telling you what did you listen to the most over the past 365 days. Some global stats here. It's not just your stats. Bad Bunny, the most streamed artist in the world this year, 18 billion. You know who Bad Bunny beat? Taylor Swift, who's in second. And third, everybody's favorite, Drake. Favorite in quotes. There you go. Who was on your Wrapped? At me. I'm curious. To some royal news now. We're just in the last couple of minutes. Prince William and Princess Kate appeared for the first time in Boston, in the U.S. now for the first time in years. The first day of a 3-day visit with a ton planned before they announced the winner of Prince William's Earthshot Prize Awards Friday. These awards go to people who help the environment, basically. We're showing you some pictures fresh into us because this welcome event happened, like as we've been on the air. Folks showing up to City Hall to get just a glimpse of the royal couple. As we said, it's the first time they've been in the U.S. in 8 years together, just months after the prince's grandmother, the Queen, died. And we're just now hearing from the White House, too, late today. President Biden is finalizing plans to meet with these two when he is in Boston on Friday. Keir Simmons is there right now. It's the president meeting the prince that everybody's looking forward to at the end of the week here. And there's a lot to this visit. Tell us what it's like on the ground, how people are feeling.
Hey, Hallie, well, I can't hear you very well, honestly, but you just missed them. They were here, I think I heard you saying just a few minutes ago. William and Catherine standing right there. Now I can hear you laughing, because literally standing right there, they were here.
What's it like? Were people like going banana? Was this like seeing the Beatles? Like how much do people, because we always talk about Keir, and I know you'll know, you always say, you Americans, you're way more into the royals than people in the UK are. Like, did you get that vibe today?
I never say that. I never say that. I don't know who you're quoting there. I would never say that. Listen, there was a lot of excitement. There were a lot of people here. It was the kind of buzz that you would expect, given the fact that they're here for the first time in 8 years. They're here as Prince and Princess of Wales. Now, you may have asked me, and I couldn't really hear you, you may have asked me about the big... the big controversy back home.
Well, I didn't hear, but let me
behind.
ask you about it now, because I want to make sure folks know what's going on with it, right? Because you've got the royals in the U.S. while back home, you've got this Palisade stepping down because of an alleged racist comment she made. Obviously, this is extremely pertinent because, number one, perhaps a shadow on this visit, and number two, we know that part of the reason why William's brother is not living in the UK anymore is because of the allegations of racism they've talked about that Meghan faced from members of the royal family.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we have to get to this aspect of it clearly, because frankly, this is potentially going to overshadow this whole 3 days. And as you described, what we've seen is an aide to the Queen Consort Camilla, who was a long-time aide to Queen Elizabeth, who is Prince William's godmother, at an event at Buckingham Palace yesterday, talking to a woman of colour and just interrogating her, frankly. I mean, when you read the transcript as described by this woman on Twitter, your jaw drops, just seeming to interrogate her about where she's from, not taking her answer that she's British, that she's from Britain, kind of saying, well, where in Africa are you from? It leaves you speechless, to be honest. Now, she has, as you say, stepped down. It has forced Prince William's spokesman to make this statement, which includes saying that racism is not tolerated anywhere in society. But as you say, it's just going to reignite this whole racism row, where Meghan and Harry said that someone in the royal family asked them what colour their child would be. And of course, then you saw Prince William asked whether the royal family were racist, answering that they were not. Is he going to get asked a question like that here again? I mean, that's going to be the concern. He's trying to put the focus on his Earthshot Prize, his environmental prize, here in Boston on Friday. The question is, will the focus be there, or will it be on what's happened back in London?
Well, that is the question, Kira, especially because, as you know, there are members of the American media who will be, I'm sure, trying to get that question to Prince William. You've got the president, who will be there. The White House being a little bit cagey at this point about what those plans look like. I think, they've got to get through a state visit from the from the leader of France first. But what is sort of next? What is the expectation for what the next 48 hours is going to look like?
Well, the trouble is, I think, to some of the expectations kind of turned upside down with this news from Buckingham Palace. Just imagine it kind of broke just as William and Catherine, Prince and Princess of Wales, were landing here. So I think, in the end, what you're going to see is the royal couple trying to stay focused on what they want to do here. Catherine is going to be trying to put the focus on early years learning for young people. William, as I mentioned, he's got this star-studded event, the Earthshot Prize, modeled on President Kennedy's moonshot here on Friday. There are going to be famous folks. The famous folks flock around the royals, particularly these royals. There, the president, we think, as you mentioned, will meet them. So maybe by Friday, the agenda will have shifted. But there is a big problem here for the royals, which is about how you make yourself look modern with these allegations of racism within the royal family.
Kira Simmons live for us in Boston. I don't get to say that often, Kira. We're glad to see you here on the U.S. side of the pond, as they say. I don't say it, but people say it. Thanks, Kira. Still to come, a global lottery for the 2024 Olympics in Paris starts tomorrow. Organizers are calling it Games Wide Open, but it's raising some questions. Are fans going to even get a fair chance to get to the events they want to see? We'll talk about it, the ticketing, a lot of talk on tickets, more coming up. It feels like it's been hard to get tickets to everything nowadays, but organizers for the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris say they've got a new plan that they hope are going to make things easier for people who want to go. Starting tomorrow, you can enter this, what organizers are calling global draw. It's basically a lottery system. If you're wondering what you're looking at, that's like the mascot for the Olympics. So in this global lottery, if you're picked, you're going to get the chance to buy some of the millions of tickets up for grabs at the Olympics during some specific sales windows starting in February. NBC's Raf Sanchez is joining us now. Raf, there has been so much talk of ticketing. How do you get tickets to events, et cetera? Talk us through the rationale from organizers who think having one ticketing location, right, for everybody around the world where people can go to for the chance to get tickets is a good idea.
It sounds risky, right, Hallie? I can hear the skepticism in your voice. 8 billion people around the world going for one website. The rationale from the organizers is that this is about fairness. This means everybody from Argentina to Zimbabwe, same website, same rules, same prices. And that is a big difference from previous games where each country would have its own allocation. They would give that allocation to resellers, completely different sets of systems everywhere. Here, in theory, is how this is going to work. And the idea is to avoid the sort of mother of all Taylor Swift-style ticket meltdowns. In theory, starting tomorrow, you can put your name into this lottery to be eligible to buy tickets. You have 2 months to enter this lottery, so all the way through December, all the way through January. So if this website melts down tomorrow, you still have another 8 weeks to put your name in. And then in February, the lucky people who win that lottery going to get the chance to buy the tickets. That's how it works in theory. We'll see what happens.
Well, it does help that, the window is not 8 hours long. You know what I mean? You have a pretty big window. It's not like the Olympics has been a stranger to ticket drama before, right, Raf?
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with this. The last Olympics, in theory, Japan 2020, COVID comes along, it's pushed back by a year, becomes Japan 2021, but only open to domestic Japanese fans. But you had lots of Americans and other people around the world who had spent thousands of dollars on tickets, really struggling to get refunds. Go back 10 years here in London, London 2012, not normally that sunny here in the UK, but it was hot that summer. People waiting 6 hours at some point to stand in line to just get their tickets. And when they got to the front of the line, parents sometimes found that they were sitting at one end of the stadium, their kids were sitting at the other, which is obviously not ideal if you've got a toddler who is now unsupervised during the long jump or something. And also just issues with resellers. You know, the resellers are out to make profits on these tickets. They jack up the prices in some cases. It becomes a case of, you know, only a certain type of person can afford to pay however much for these tickets. And in London, you ended up in a situation where you sometimes would have empty seats at the most sought-after sporting event in the world because the resellers just couldn't sell those tickets at prices. So the stadium went empty, the athletes not watched by spectators. So a real disappointment in that sense. The hope is that this is going to level the playing field.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Well, we're going to find it. Raph Sanchez, our chief ticket beat correspondent, I guess, for us for the next couple of days. Appreciate it. Thank you. Let's talk more about what's going down overseas, especially with the New Zealand Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and her Finnish counterpart making some waves at a joint news conference today. Here's what happened. You've probably already seen it in your group chats, right? It may have been sent to you in your DMs already. This journalist, a guy, that's going to be relevant here, asked a question about why these two prime ministers, why these two leaders of two countries were meeting, perhaps because of their age and, quote, having a lot of common stuff there. I want you to watch.
Yeah, a lot of people will be wondering, are you two meeting just because, you know, you're similar in age and, you know, got a lot of, you know, common stuff there, you know, when you got into politics and stuff? Or can Kiwis actually expect to see more deals between our two countries down the line? Because
my first question is, I wonder whether or not anyone ever asked Barack Obama and John Key if they met because they were of similar age. Because two women meet, it's not simply because of their gender.
Yeah, we are meeting because we are prime ministers.
You know, this response was like 3 minutes long from the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and she went on to talk about the trade between New Zealand and Finland, a trade deal that they're trying to work out, commenting that they obviously have much more to talk about than simply their genders, which was the implication of the question. Got a lot of backlash online with some commentators wondering, one of them in particular saying, well, you might as well ask, like the journalist might as well have asked, were they going to talk about boys and whether their periods were all synced up here, right? These are two prime ministers here. They talked about issues like the global economy, the cost of living, the shared commitment to supporting Ukraine. Still watching for some more fallout on that one. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Southeast Bureau, country singer Jake Flint unexpectedly died over the weekend, just hours after getting married in Oklahoma. His publicist is confirming to NBC News he was just 37. Flint's publicist told a local paper he died in his sleep. His new wife posted on Facebook saying, we should be going through wedding photos, but instead I have to pick out clothes to bury my husband in. His cause of death still not known. Also from our Southeast Bureau, a miraculous rescue in Cape Coral, Florida. Look at this. After a woman drove her car into a canal, new body cam video is now out showing an officer jumping into the canal. That's that splash there, smashing one of the car's windows. He pulls the woman out, brings her up onto the ground. She was taken to the hospital. We're still waiting on word for her condition. From our D.C. Bureau, happening not too long ago, the National Christmas Tree was lit. The ceremony happening right now near the White House. Yes, D.C. has two big famous Christmas trees, one at the Capitol, this one over at the White House. Look at that. It's pretty. 100th year of the ceremony with President Biden and the First Lady there. This year's tree is 27 feet tall, and fun fact, it's the first white fir to be the national Christmas tree. We love a fun fact here on this show, and we are not done with pretty-looking Christmas trees because the countdown is now on tonight to the Rockefeller Center tree lighting. We've got our Craig Melvin coming up to give us all the behind-the-scenes goss in just a sec. Time now to get to the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. We talked earlier about all that wind and rain slamming the Northeast tonight, which means, yeah, it's looking a little bit wet, a little bit gloomy at the Christmas tree lighting at Rock Center. It will not stay gloomy for long. That's the tree. That's what it looks like now. Tonight, it's going to be a lot brighter once all 50,000 of its lights get turned on. This is a tradition in Midtown Manhattan for something like 90 years. You're going to see performances this year by stars like Alicia Keys, Jimmy Allen, even the Sesame Street Muppets. Today Show anchor Craig Melvin, not a Muppet, but he has been part of this big ceremony since 2018. Craig Melvin, we are honored and humbled to have you as part of our broadcast. What are you looking? What's the face?
I didn't realize it's been doing.
What's the stink eye? We just started.
I didn't realize I'd been doing it that long.
Bro.
I feel like I'm getting old.
you are aging gracefully. That's fair to say. But you are doing it along with our Christmas tree celebration and our long Christmas tree tradition here. I love this so much. I will tell you, we always say, like, what's in the group chats? What's in the group chats from all my friends in Midtown Manhattan is, like, the traffic is insane. There's a million people at 30 Rock. Yeah. It's wet, it's gross, it's kind of gloomy. Do you have, like, extra jackets? You're inside, obviously. We're hoping to talk to you outside, but I know it's a mess. Talk me through it.
So here's the thing. I just saw your faux weather report there, and I'll play the role of Al Roker for a moment here. The rain is stopping as we speak. It is going to be a dry evening. Our major concern tonight is actually the wind at this point. We're expecting winds somewhere between 15, 30 miles per hour at some points. But the rain has stopped, which is great. Good. Because of security, you can't bring in umbrellas. So people were really going to be soggy and upset.
And there are a lot of people who are, like, excited to see you. They've been. When you think about doing this tradition, it's, like, so cool that you get to do it. What has been, do you have a favorite? Can you pick a favorite? Is that like asking you to pick your favorite kid?
I watched the sizzle there of some of the acts that we've had over the years, and it's probably not even the musicians or the rockettes. It's the people who come from far and wide. Like, you start to talk to people during the commercial breaks or between segments, and you're talking to these people, and it's a bucket list item. I mean, people who come in from California or Texas or the Carolinas or Florida just to see, like, the tree get lit. And so every year, just those conversations, especially with the kids who are staying up late, and that's always the highlight for me. That really is.
I love that because it's like the Today Show Plaza kind of on steroids a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, people coming out to see this amazing thing that you can only see in New York with you.
That's a great comparison. And it's funny because we get a lot of crossover audience. A lot of the folks who are on the plaza this morning for the Today Show are the same folks who will be at the Christmas tree tonight. They'll come back tomorrow for the Today Show as well. But it's the tree at Rockefeller Center, and as you noted, it has been a 90-year tradition. Even in the throes of the pandemic, we came in to light the tree without the crowds, of course. It's a tradition that has continued. But what's been funny to watch over the years is the sheer number of people who stop to take that iconic picture right in front of the tree. And that's what creates the backlog and pedestrian traffic for about a month and a half.
Which is, like, fine. It's worth it if people like it. What's something people may be surprised to hear about this tradition, about putting it on, about doing the broadcast? Like, what's something that people might not know that you think is interesting?
The countdown is very stressful, Hallie. That countdown to the actual lighting of the tree.
But you're a pro.
Oh, but the reality is you've got the music, you've got our yapping, some ad lib, but you gotta hit those commercial breaks. Companies pay a lot of money to advertise before and after the actual lighting of the tree. So in your ear, every year you get the 10, 9, 8.
Oh,
and depending on where you are in the actual rundown of the show, they'll go from like 8, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 2, 1, go, go, go.
Ooh, I'm stressing out for you on that.
So there's
that's
that.
A lot. If anybody can handle it with grace and good humor, it is you. Are you wearing red and green, or is my monitor weird? Did you toss on a little?
I'm wearing red and green, but this is my rehearsal outfit. This is not the actual outfit I'm going to wear tonight.
I can't wait to see the final situation.
It's a Ron Burgundy throwback, seriously. You'll appreciate it.
Thank you, Craig. Can't wait to watch. I hope everybody does. Thank you, sir. He will be along with the rest of our team on coverage tonight, 8 Eastern on wherever you watch NBC. I got to go. We're over time. I could talk to Craig for another 20 minutes. I will spare you that. I will see you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.